Okay, welcome everyone. This afternoon, I have the privilege of holding a memorial service for Joseph L. Ryder, a 58-year member of the Lycoming Law Association, a former president of the Law Association, as well as most recently a trustee of the Lycoming Law Foundation. We recognize and appreciate the attendance of family, friends, and members of the bar and bench here today who are here to join us for the memorial service. I did recognize at least one family member that's here. Mr. Roman, I'm not sure if there are other family members or friends specifically to Mr. Ryder that are here as a part of this call, but I would welcome all of you here today. Back in January, I appointed a committee to prepare a report and resolution recognizing the life and accomplishments of Joe Ryder. The chairman of the committee is Paul Roman, and the members of the committee are Fred Holland, Ed Mitchell, and Thomas Burkholder, who was a local attorney for the Trust Department of Woodlands Bank. I now call upon Paul, the chair of the committee, to present the committee report and resolution.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. Ladies and gentlemen, Barbara Ryder, Mark Ryder, and Margaret, fellow members of the bar, and other family and friends who are joining us today via Zoom. The committee was asked to draft a resolution memorializing the life of Joseph L. Ryder, Esquire, and submit it today to this service. The following resolution is submitted for consideration by this court. Joseph Leo Ryder, Esquire, a member of the bar of this court since 1961, died unexpectedly at his home in Fairfield Township, Lycoming County, Pennsylvania, on May 3rd, 2020. He was the husband of Barbara Winters Ryder, with whom he shared 53 years of marriage. In addition to his wife, Joe was survived by his daughter, Margaret of Georgia, and son, Mark of Montoursville. Joe was born on May 19, 1935 in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and was the eldest son of Leo and Anna Statz Ryder. Joe was raised in Williamsport along with his brothers, John, Eugene, Thomas, and David, and a sister, Marilyn Neihart. At age 4, Joe was afflicted with polio, which handicapped him, in name only, for the balance of his life. The need for crutches did not hinder him from working at the family business, Faxon Lumber Company, unloading rail cars laden with lumber, as well as performing other tasks at the business. Joe graduated from St. Mary's High School, a predecessor of St. John Newman Regional Academy, in 1953, and then from Lycoming College in 1957. While in college, he was active in his fraternity, Alpha Gamma Upsilon, serving as his president during his senior year, and was assistant editor of Lycoming College's yearbook. Joe completed his undergraduate degree from Lycoming College in 1957. Thereafter, he graduated from Georgetown University School of Law in 1961. He was admitted to the bar of the District of Columbia, as well as the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the United States District Court, Middle District of Pennsylvania, the U.S. District Court, District of Columbia, and the U.S. Court of Appeals, District of Columbia Circuit. Shortly thereafter, Joe joined the law firm of First McCormick, Muir & Lynn. As a typical young associate, Joe was relegated to handling family law matters, real estate and estate administration, as well as a variety of other matters. During his fledgling years, he was taken under the wing of Malcolm Muir and began to focus on estate administration and estate planning. The two left the firm in 1968 and formed the law office of Malcolm Muir, of which Joe was an associate. The association was relatively short-lived, as Malcolm Muir was appointed as the U.S. District Judge for the Middle District of Pennsylvania on November 6, 1970. At that time, the law office of Joseph L. Ryder was formed. Paul A. Roman became an associate of Mr. Ryder's in 1984, and the two continued to practice until Mr. Ryder's death. While a capable speaker, Joe avoided appearing in court whenever possible. He felt much more comfortable behind his desk, surrounded by a wall of files, or with a client reviewing and explaining their estate planning documents, or the administration of an ongoing estate with an executor. It was a rare client who would leave these sessions without feeling that they had a thorough grasp of their situation and confident that their matter was in the very capable hands of Mr. Ryder. Joe was well recognized by his peers for his expertise in estate administration. This administration was not exclusive to Lycoming County, but to the surrounding counties as well, as his reputation was known far and wide. He would frequently field questions from other attorneys regarding technical administration questions, but he felt particular satisfaction if a younger attorney would call upon him, especially those that did not focus their practice on estate administration. Many times, Joe would bring these attorneys into his office to take them step by step through the administration of an estate that they were handling. He enjoyed the satisfaction that he received by mentoring the young attorney, but just as importantly, he knew that the estate was going to be handled correctly. He played no favorites with regard to his clients. He would meticulously analyze an estate of $10,000 as much as he would a multi-million-dollar estate. Efficiency was not his strong suit. He would repeatedly take on small estates that no other attorney would accept due to the fact that they were financially losing propositions. Joe was oftentimes referred to as a workaholic due to his 80-hour work week. But the term is somewhat of a misnomer, because Joe found time to serve his community, the courts, his church, and his family. Although he rarely appeared in court, Joe was well known by the judiciary of the county. He became the Lycoming Law Association president in 1976, and together with then Judge Thomas Raup, created the Bench Bar Committee, on which he served as a representative of the Orphans Court Division until his passing. Also, as president of the association, Joe hired the first full-time secretary for the association, a position which continues to this day. He was also appointed a member of the committee charged with the task of determining the necessity for a fourth judge for Lycoming County. In 1977, Joe was appointed by the Supreme Court Disciplinary Committee to serve a 3-year term on the state's disciplinary board. Beginning in 1978, and for the ensuing decade, he served as a member of the House of Delegates for the Pennsylvania Bar Association. His devotion to the county bar continued until his death, as he was the sole original member of the Lycoming Law Association Foundation, of which he served as president for many years. Mr. Ryder's contributions were not limited to the courts and the local bar, as he was a very active member of a variety of non-law related community service groups. He was a founding member of the Loyalsock Kiwanis, subsequently serving as its president, and also served as president of the Williamsport Jaycees. While a member of the Jaycees, he was the recipient of the Williamsport Chamber of Commerce Key Man of the Year Award in 1966. In 1967, he was appointed by Governor Schaefer as a member of the Governor's Committee for Employment on the Handicapped and served several terms on the state committee, while being a very active member on the local level as well. He was also a valued member of the Lycoming County Industrial Properties Corporation for numerous years and was a board member for the Lycoming Foundation for several decades, including serving as its president at the time of his passing. Many years were also devoted to serving on the boards of the Park Home and the Blind Association. Joe is also a past member of the Divine Providence Foundation, the Ryder Park Foundation, and in 1977, he was served as president of the Ross Club, where he had the vision to turn what was a men's-only club to permitting full membership of women as well. Joe and his family were founding members of St. Anne's Catholic Church in Loyalsock, and he was a devoted lifetime member. He was an instrumental member of the school board for the fledgling St. Anne's Catholic School and subsequently served on the Bishop Newman School Board. In spite of all these activities, he was still able to devote time to his family, especially family vacations when the children were younger, playing setback and spending time at his cabin on Loyalsock Creek. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the undersigned committee, joined in by the Lycoming Law Association and the Lycoming Bar, to hereby recognize and mourn the passing of Joseph L. Ryder, Esquire, and recognize and remember him as an excellent attorney who devoted his professional life to all of his clients equally and to the utmost of his ability, regardless of their station in life. As an attorney, he represented and stood for the highest principles of the legal profession. As a colleague, he served as an example and resource to his peers and young lawyers alike. As a member of the bar, he was devoted an abundance of his limited time to the courts. As a citizen of the community, he was an untiring servant. And as a man who had limited physical abilities, he was honored and respected by his family, his associates, his clients, and all of those that he had an opportunity to touch. And be it further resolved that these resolutions and statements be spread at length upon the minutes for the court with copies of the family to Joseph L. Ryder, Esquire, and be published in the Lycoming Reporter. And be it resolved finally that this court, the Lycoming Bar and Lycoming Law Association, extend to Joseph L. Ryder's wife, daughter, son, and extended family our deep and heartfelt sympathy and our great respect for Joseph L. Ryder, Esquire. Respectfully submitted by your committee, Paul A. Roman, Chairman, Clifford A. Readers, Esquire, Fred A. Holland, Esquire, C. Edward S. Mitchell, Esquire, and Thomas B. Burkholder, Esquire. I believe, Your Honor, a copy of the resolution has already been submitted to the court.
I do have it. Thank you. And I was wondering if Mr. Roman, if you would like to say a few words.
At this time, I will, Your Honor. I'm going to defer to my colleagues first, if you would, please.
Okay, sure. Then I'll just go down them in the list in order.
Okay.
To Readers, I believe I let you in. Yes, you're there.
Yes, yes, thank you very much, Judge. May it please the court, fellow members of the bar. It's always a great honor to serve on these committees and talk about people who in my long career I've come to know in one way or another. In this case, not as a litigator, but when I first heard about Joe Ryder, it was actually not from Joe Ryder. It was from Judge Muir. Of course, I came here to work for Judge Muir, and Judge Muir liked to tell stories. He was a great storyteller, something I wish I was better at. But one of the stories he would tell is when, towards the end of his tenure at the firm, as he would call it, Joe Ryder came along. And I always had the feeling that I got that job because of Joe Ryder. Joe Ryder was a Georgetown graduate and a member of the same bars that I was, DC. And he liked Joe Ryder so much and respected him so much, well, he'd give another Georgetown guy a chance. And of course, as time went on, I got to understand that. He spoke of Joe before while I was still over there clerking in a way that really made me want to meet this guy. I mean, you know, I just heard such great things about him. And Judge Muir, I was surprised when I first met Joe. I had no idea about a disability. Judge Muir never brought that to my attention, and nobody else ever did. He was just a very highly regarded, well-spoken about attorney in this community. And he was somebody that Judge Muir proudly was very proud of his association with. And he would talk about that at some length. What Judge Muir said about him, it's interesting. I have some things I've saved, inscriptions in books and some other things that Judge Muir gave to me, some of which, will sort of remain in my archives till it's proper to show to the people. But I noted that one of his comments that he wrote about Joe Ryder was that he had the quintessential qualities of promptness, civility, innate fairness, decency, cordiality, all of the attributes that a fine and highly respected lawyer should acquire, maintain, and promote. And I have a note from him that said that, and that's absolutely the truth, isn't it? And that's why we're here, celebrating his life. Everything that Judge Muir said about him, of course, was consistent with my own experience. Now, while I didn't practice in Joe's field, I actually had many occasions to work with him because in the work that I do in wrongful death and survival actions, we have many opportunities and many needs to talk with people with his expertise. And in order to properly maintain the interests of our clients, make sure that they were, that whatever funds they came into were properly handled. There were often orphans court matters that would come up, but usually it was a handling of, at times, small sums of money, at times large sums of money. It didn't really matter whether it was large or small, but Joe was always available to answer questions and to talk to people. I I will tell you that as a fellow member of the bar, he never charged for any of that. He never sent a bill. He was our own estate planning lawyer and never billed us. And finally, my wife just couldn't stand that anymore. And she called him up and she said, if you don't send us a bill, I'm just gonna send you money. So he said, well, you send what's fair. So that made it difficult. And we finally did get it together and send him what we thought was fair. And we got a very nice thank you note. And that was that. That's how we dealt with people. That's how he dealt with fellow members of the bar. Joe also, many of you probably know this, would not take a referral fee. He didn't think it was ethical, even though he and I had many discussions about that. And I would try to convince him it was not only ethical, but it was appropriate. It was the way we all did business. I never could convince him of that. And he would never take a referral fee. I remember close to the end of his life, being in his office and having a long talk with him about Ryder Park, which he was very proud of. I used to go up there with my dog. I used to cross country ski up there, kind of actually a little bit dangerous. You know, it's very steep. If you've been there, you know what it's like. And then you have those beautiful vistas at the top. And I would go up there with the dog and the skis. A few times, you know, wound up on my butt, but it was always great fun. And of course, in the spring, I'd go back, in the summer. And he was very proud of that place. And I remember several times hearing the whole history about it from him. And I love history. It was wonderful. Naturally, if I did have any problems, as I said earlier, dealing with estates, trust wills, any of that kind of stuff, you know, he'd get right on the phone and talk about it. The other kind of curious thing I thought you would enjoy hearing about is I once had a contested matter with Joe. This is early in my career, and he did occasionally do some contested matters. And I remember thinking, like, there's no way I'm going to win against this guy because the judges have such great respect for him. It wasn't necessarily about his position. It wasn't necessarily about his clients. It was about him. And the fact that the court really personally relied upon his decency and the validity of his opinions. It was assumed that whatever argument he would make would be a reasonable one, and it was. And that kind of respect for a lawyer, boy, that's what we should all be striving for. There are lots of great lawyers out there. I've always thought of Joe Ryder as one of those who was really a template for what we should all be like. You know, a lot of lawyers my age like to complain about the younger lawyers. Oh, people aren't as civil as they used to be, and blah blah. I personally don't believe that. I think at every age and any age, people could be civil, they could be decent, or they could be rough and tough and crude. And regardless of whether a lawyer is a younger lawyer or a newer lawyer, or whatever it is, we need examples like Joe Ryder to think about when we deal with other lawyers, when we deal with the bench, when we deal with the bar, because that's really what's best for our clients. And Joe knew that. Joe Ryder knew what was best for his clients was to be the kind of person that he was, the kind of individual that he was, who was informed only by what was fair and decent and professional. Joe's contribution to the Lycoming Law Foundation has been mentioned, and I remember when that foundation was set up, Jack Humphrey was very active and would come and talk to me about how great it was to work with Joe Ryder. He really helped make that happen in an organization that helps legal services and helps the underserved be served, very important benefit. I couldn't help reflecting on the comment about the Ross Club, because when I came to town, it was common for lawyers in this law firm to be bought a membership in the Ross Club, but I was not bought a membership in the Ross Club because I was of the wrong religious background. And it wasn't only women who were not permitted in the Ross Club, it was also Jews and African Americans and lots of other people. It was an exclusive club. And Joe was one of the people who changed that and thereby changed my life and the life of many other people. So he will be missed greatly by the bar and by everyone who benefited from his acumen and his, if I may borrow a Judge Muir phrase, astute perspicacity. He was a gem, a rarity among lawyers and an exemplar to all of us. May he rest in peace, and my sympathies to the family. He was a great man. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Readers. Mr. Holland, don't forget to unmute.
Thank you, Your Honor. And my apologies that I'm wearing headphones. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay.
Yes.
When I tried to unplug them, I couldn't hear over my computer. So I have headphones on, not the most attractive look, but at least it covers my bald head. At any rate, may it please the court, my colleagues from the bar, and members of Joe's family. The first phrase that I thought of as I was writing this was that Joe was the consummate gentleman and lawyer. He always made me feel comfortable anytime I was dealing with him. If Joe disagreed with you, and he would disagree if he felt it was appropriate, he stated what he thought clearly, but always politely. Unlike what we put in the resolution, I would like to say that efficiency was Joe's strong point in many ways. He may have taken on cases that had minimal value, but he was a very efficient lawyer. If you were working on a project with Joe and he was drafting something, you knew that you would get it soon, and you knew that the quality would be top-notch. He also did everything he did without losing his sense of humor. In virtually every telephone call I had with Joe, we found something that we could share a laugh about. I got to know Joe best in my role as the solicitor for the Lycoming Foundation. This is not the Lycoming Law Association Foundation, but the Lycoming Foundation. The mission of that foundation is to promote economic development by making low-interest loans available to businesses. Joe was president of that foundation for as long as I can remember, and I started working for that foundation back in the 1990s. In his role as president, Joe handled everything from soup to nuts. He signed and mailed commitment letters. He scheduled and conducted board meetings. When questions arose about loan documentation, he was always there as a valuable resource for me. I marveled at his ability to keep on top of this while maintaining his extremely busy law practice. Later, I joined the Lycoming Law Association Foundation, another foundation that owes a great deal to Joe's many years of service. I learned a lot about the practice of law from Joe. I bet if I'd played setback with him, I would have been a better card player too. But the most valuable lessons that I learned from Joe were about giving back to the community. Joe illustrated that in so many ways. His pride in what he did for both foundations that I've mentioned, his pride about Ryder Park, the pride that he had in his family and his family's business. I consider it a badge of honor that the front of my building has inscribed in an Art Deco thing, the Faxon Company. The Faxon Company was part of Joe's family's business. And I actually also helped with liquidating the Faxon Company. And the pride that Joe exhibited in his family's business was another example of how he achieved, despite being very busy, a good work balance. It's something we can all learn from Joe. All lawyers can learn by Joe's example. I've learned some. I will continue to cherish his memories and will learn from him even as we miss him greatly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Mr. Mitchell. Let's get you to unmute. Can you unmute, Mr. Mitchell? It should be in the bottom left-hand corner. There we go. Awesome.
Sorry. May it please
No
the
worries.
court, fellow members of the bar, members of the Ryder family. I guess my longest and most prominent association with Joe was through the bench bar committee. He was a member of the bench bar committee from the very beginning. And I was a member of it for a long time, and I don't believe Joe Ryder ever missed a meeting. And it's interesting because he died the day before a meeting. And that was the first meeting we had after COVID. So it was done on by conference call. And in that meeting, when we called the roll, we had to announce Joe's death. He not only attended every meeting, he participated in every meeting. He was the representative of the Orphans Court, and he always had something new for us, new legislation, new regulation, new case, something to add that people who practiced in the Orphans Court needed to know. Joe was also, as has been said, was a very active member of the Lycoming Law Association Foundation and a founder and a president. Also, he also was a fundraiser. And I remember when the foundation was celebrating its 35th year, Joe contacted various attorneys and firms and suggested that they give sizable contributions tied into the amount, the number of the years that the foundation had been in existence. Another thing, when he was president, Joe also was very, very intent on having the local rules updated and codified. And I know that because he made me chairman of the Rules Committee. So, but that was also a passion of his, to have the local rules not only current, but codified and available for use. Joe was he loved the Loyalsock Valley. He loved the Loyalsock Creek. He was particularly proud of, if you went into his office, he had various paintings by local artist Ron Beach that he was proud of. And the one that I think he was the most proud of is a painting of the former covered bridge over Wallace Run, right where Wallace Run runs into Loyalsock Creek. He was very proud of Ryder Park, but also very protective of Ryder Park, particularly protective of Ryder Park when the gas companies began attempting to negotiate gas leases. Joe was absolutely adamant that there would not be able to be any drilling on Ryder Park. As mentioned, he was an officer in the various family businesses, which included Faxon Lumber Company, Faxon Construction Company, Faxon Land Company. And those of us can remember the beautiful building at the intersection of East 3rd Street and Northway Road, the stone and brick building on the southeast corner was their headquarters. It's not there anymore, when it's now Buffalo Wild Wings, but it was a beautiful building, and it was the entrance and probably one of the original, if not the first building in what is now known as the Golden Strip. Faxon Land Company, or the Faxon companies, developed portions of Loyalsock Township, particularly Faxon, and then later Limehurst. And you might find this, I find this interesting. In some discussion, it wasn't with Joe, but another member of the family, he told me where the name Faxon actually originated. The streets of Faxon had been laid out, and as you know, Lafayette Parkway and Faxon Parkway cross at Faxon Circle. So they're actually in the shape of an X. And then there are long north-south parallel streets on either side of Faxon Circle. So the people of the Ryder family who developed Faxon decided they needed a word with 5 letters and an X in the middle. And somebody was traveling out west and saw a sign for a town called Faxon. And that is actually the origin of the name Faxon. Not a family name, it's just a name that fit the design of the land development of Faxon. Joe was an outdoorsman. And this is another example of Joe being, handicapped in name only. He was a deer hunter, and this story came directly from him. He told me one time he was on a deer hunt and they put him on a watch. The hunt ended, everybody gathered, and somebody eventually said, "Where's Joe?" And then they realized nobody had gone back to pick Joe up. So it's another example of Joe participating in activities without regard to his physical limitations. Joe was also a member of what Judge Muir called the longest continuous poker game known to man, that met at the Ross Clubs on Monday night. Every Monday night, a group which included Judge Muir, Judge Greavy, other local attorneys and businessmen, and they played poker every Monday night. And this game, at least according to Judge Muir, dated back until sometime in the 1920s. And it was by invitation only. Professionally, Joe was very keen on the rules of professional responsibility. They governed, he practiced according to them. He was very much aware, very much conscious, and very much observant of the rules having to do with attorney-client privilege and confidentiality. And I'll wrap this up. I think in summary, Joe Ryder is the best example of what a lawyer ought to be in the way he lived his life, the way he practiced law, and the example he gave to the rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Burkholder.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, members of the bar, as well as members of the Ryder family. I am pleased to be a part of these proceedings today in honor of or in memory of Joe Ryder. I had the privilege of working with Joe for nearly 35 years. My professional relationship with Joe is maybe somewhat different than with most attorneys in that we were always working together on the same side, so to speak, as opposed to be on opposite sides of the table or opposite sides of an issue. I work for a bank trust department, and most of my work with Joe is in the area of its state administration. We did quite a few estates together over the years, large to small, some of them relatively easy, some of them very difficult. And I learned a lot from working with Joe, a lot, extremely a lot. He was always generous with his time, always available to discuss various issues or explain how things should be. But the main thing I learned from working with Joe was that you did it right. Everything was to be done right and correctly. And it was everyone, every time, by the book, straight down the line, no matter what the size of the estate, no matter who or what was involved, you did it right. And that was just a big thing that I learned from Joe in working with Joe. And in observations with Joe and working with his clients, Joe has always exhibited the highest degree of professionalism, along with being kind and very considerate of his clients. And he was dedicated to representing his interests. Some other firsthand observations, it kind of echoes with Ed and Cliff and Fred have said. I work with Joe in relation to the Lycoming Law Association Foundation. Joe is very dedicated to the operation of that foundation, and right up until the time of his death, he was acting as president of that organization. And Joe is committed to the enhancement of the legal profession through the foundation in providing grants for needed services or programs related to the legal profession. Also, I had the privilege of working with Joe on the Lycoming Economic Development Foundation, or the Lycoming Foundation, which Joe was very involved in and involved to the extent of being very interested in the economic vitality and well-being of the community. That was kind of his baby. As Ed said, he did everything, or Fred may have said, he did everything from soup to nuts on the foundation. He wanted me to become the president of that foundation. Well, he got his ultimate wish. With his death, I acceded to the office of president. So Other words that come to mind in thinking of Joe were courage, perseverance, and determination. As we know, Joe was disabled, but that never held him back. He always, he never used that as an excuse or wanted you to make any kind of concessions or special treatment to him. He would come to your office, he would go to a client's house. He just didn't use that as any kind of impediment to him serving his clients or his profession. But one thing that astounded me in relation to his disability was, as you may recall, his old office, previous office with Joe and with Paul was on the 3rd floor of the PNC building. And within the past 10 or 12 years, on 2 occasions that I can recall, the elevator went out. That didn't stop Joe from going to the office. He went up those steps one by one, just amazing. I just came to the conclusion it was probably not a good bet to challenge Joe to an arm wrestling contest. He must have had just incredible upper body strength, but it's just amazing that he went. And I've been on those steps, and they're not great steps for a normal person, but for him to go up and down twice a day. He made a concession. He didn't go out to lunch, but it was just truly amazing. I could go on, but I know I'll just echo what other folks have said. But in summary, I just found Joe to be a remarkable person and a remarkable attorney. I would describe him as an impact person in that, when reflecting on your own life, who would have an impact on your family or your professional life. And Joe Ryder would definitely be on my list as an impact person in my life. So with that, I'll close, and I thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Burkholder. Mr. Roman, I'm going to have to ask you to unmute, okay? There you go. Oh,
No? Okay.
there it is.
Okay.
Perfect. Yep.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you. I see that I made the critical mistake of placing myself behind my far more eloquent colleagues. Trying to follow them may not be the easiest task, but I'll do what I can. I first met Joe in March of 1984. I was a 3rd-year law student at Temple, and after having spent 3 years in Philadelphia, I knew I did not want to spend a 4th there. So I started sending out resumes to law offices in Lycoming County and surrounding areas, and Joe was the first one to respond. So we set up an interview, and I knew of Joe, and I think he knew of me because we both belonged to St. Anne's Church, but we had not formally met. But as oftentimes is said, first impressions are lasting impressions. And what I made of Joe that first meeting was what he remained for the next 36 years that we were together. He was a no-nonsense attorney who had his particular ideas as what an attorney should be, how they should comport themselves, and how an office should be run. Cliff readers mentioned those things, some of those qualities that Judge Muir had cited as well. I felt very comfortable with Joe during that first interview, but I was somewhat intimidated as well. On my second day in the office, Joe instructed me to call Ed Mitchell on a matter. And I didn't know Ed, and I called and introduced myself and told him who I was. And then I referred to him as Mr. Mitchell. And he made it very clear. He said, "You need to learn one thing now." He said, "We're colleagues, you call me Ed." I called Mr. Ryder for the first 5 years we practiced together. And finally, about the 5th year, he said, "You can call me Joe." So again, that was just one of he was a little bit of a throwback in some ways. Prior to our interview, I had heard of his reputation as a tireless worker. And during the course of that interview, I was able to kind of put the pieces together of what his weekly schedule was. It was typically be in the office by 6:45 a.m., stay until 5:30. He would then go home. Barbara would have dinner for he and his family, but he'd be back in the office by 6:30 and stay until about 9 o'clock. Though he did slack off on Friday evenings, he didn't go back after dinner, but he was back in there first thing on Saturday morning. and would stay until 5 o'clock. And then on Sundays, he would always go to early mass at St. Anne's, take his family out to breakfast, and then be on the office by 10 and stay again until 5. I think during that interview, he saw the look of, I don't know if it was terror or distress in my face when kind of really him realizing that I kind of figured this out. But he put me at ease when he told me, I don't ever expect you to work the same kind of hours that I do. And I was forever grateful for that. When he was talking about his work ethic and how much time he spent and everything like that, it wasn't a case of him bragging, because that was the last thing he would do. He would always try to deflect anything away from himself, any kind of attention. He just didn't like the spotlight on him. As I mentioned, he was a very capable speaker, really, but even in matters like this, a memorial service, he was on numerous committees, but he would always keep his comments very, very brief, 2 to 3 minutes, and that was the extent of it. He just felt much more comfortable that way. Honestly, I think if it were up to him, today's session would last about 15 minutes in total, but he doesn't have a call on this one. I remember one particular incident. He and I were at an American Businesswomen's Association banquet, and they were honoring the Boss of the Year. And Joe didn't know that he was going to be receiving it because we'd been to several prior to that. But in that particular night, he was the recipient. And he was expected to give a short acceptance speech. And well, he got up and he said, "Thank you very much, ladies." And he then went on to say that you've probably never met an attorney who was at a loss for words. Well, now you have. Thank you very much. So that was Joe. That was an extent of a speech for him. When we were in smaller groups, he would be a little bit more less reserved. I always enjoyed having lunch with them at the Ross Club. We would sit in the back of the room at a larger table with a lot of older attorneys, businessmen. And there was a lot of banter back and forth between these guys, telling stories, and there could be multiple conversations going on at once. But if you older members remember the old E.F. Hutton commercials, when Joe talked, people listened. When he would say something, the whole table would get quiet because everybody wanted to hear what he had to say. If we lingered a little bit longer, some days, if we started lunch a little bit late and got there and there were only a few people left at the table, he would even become a little bit more relaxed, and especially if John Youngman Jr. were one of the people at the table still. Those of you who remember John Jr., he sometimes had a very unique outlook on life and certain issues, and he would sit there and pontificate about them. And just to get John going, Joe would always take the opposite point of view of whatever John said, whether he agreed with it or not. He would take the opposite side, and that would always provide us with some comedic relief then for the rest of the day. It's already been mentioned about Joe's relationship with Judge Muir, but I would be remiss, I think, if I didn't mention a little bit. I think Joe simply idolized the way Judge Muir conducted himself as an attorney. He patterned his office policies and his practice the way that Judge Muir had said it, that he had learned it from Judge Muir. If you'd ever seen Joe's desk, it oftentimes looked like a hurricane had gone through it. Every square inch of his desk was covered with files. And I don't mean just an individual file. They were stacked about 2 feet high, and they were surrounding him. And there'd be multiple pink phone slips strewn about the table as well, the desk as well. Some of them would have burn marks through them as a result of his pipe, which was always in his mouth, or on his ashtray next to them. But it was always a special occasion when Judge Muir was going to be stopping in the office, because that was the one thing that Joe was a little bit different with Judge Muir. Judge Muir, Joe would have his secretary clean off his entire desk and have to take everything off a desk and put it into another room. Clean off the desk so it was immaculate, so that Judge Muir wouldn't be disappointed in what Joe's desk looked like. I don't think Joe had many regrets in his life. But that was the one thing I think he did have, was that he didn't die like Judge Muir did. He expressed that he wanted to die at his desk. He came very close, because when he passed away, he was getting dressed at home, ready to come into the office that day. Joe was really a relatively simple man when it came to his lifestyle. He would buy the same cars year after year. He would buy every so couple of years, he would buy a Chevy Caprice year after year. He was very disappointed when they stopped making them. And he had to get a different kind of model, in which he then bought 3 or 4 of those as well at the time. He always wore a white shirt, a tie, and a sport coat. Though you could always, every once in a while, you would know that Barbara had gone shopping for him because he might show up in a colored shirt every once in a blue moon. And he always ordered a peanut butter and jelly sandwich at the Ross Club, which was somewhat of a standing joke as well. To call Joe thrifty might be a little bit of an understatement, but he was extremely generous in a lot of manners that people didn't know about. It wasn't until I did his final income tax returns for him that I went back and saw all the charitable contributions to so many different organizations over the years that he had made, even when charitable contributions were not deductible any longer. There's many times I was with him on the street when he'd be approached by people who were maybe down on their luck, and it was nothing for him to just give them a $20 bill. He really cared for the people he worked with too. Many secretaries over the years would go to him with their problems. He was a second father to them. They would go in and talk to him about their personal issues, financial issues if it were, whatever it might be. No matter what his schedule was, his door would close and he would spend whatever amount of time, an hour and a half with them if necessary, to work with them through their problems, help them financially if necessary. And all of those secretaries over the years would always come to me and tell me how much they appreciated his guidance and his thoughtfulness for his help that he provided to them to get through their own difficult situations. Joe was always a very guarded man with regard to his family. If I'd ask him a specific question, he would always answer it, but he would rarely volunteer any information. I might ask him, well, we were at lunch, I would say, so how's Margaret doing? Oh, well, she loves it in Georgia. She's got her horses down there, and he would go on about that. And I didn't even know, when did she move to Georgia? Oh, well, that was about 3 years ago. Or he would talk, I'd say on a different occasion, how is Mark doing? Oh, he loves being a state trooper. Well, I had no idea that he was even considering being a state trooper. But that was maybe a year in the past, but he would never bring up these things. But if you open the door to them, you could see the pride that he had and the love that he had for his family. And just given the opportunity to talk about them, though he, like I said, was just reserved so much that he didn't want to volunteer it. I'm going to tell you a secret that Joe never told anybody. Now, it's been referenced a little bit today, but Joe did have a disability. He needed the crutches to get around, but he never used the handicap as a crutch. He never expected nor wanted anybody to treat him any different than anybody else would be. He didn't really even care for it if somebody opened a door for him. He could do it himself, but he would never make somebody feel badly if they did. At our old office, our coffee maker was down the hall, a considerable distance from his office, but every morning he would go down there with his coffee cup, fill it up and bring it back down the hall, banging it against his crutches all the way. Fortunately, the floor was tiled because it would make a trail of coffee the whole way back to his office. He'd end up with only half a cup. But better that than to have somebody wait on him. After Joe passed, I've had the opportunity about the last year to meet with a lot of his clients. And I think to a person, every one of them would take time talking to me about him, how much they admired him, not just for his ability as an attorney, which was remarkable, but how he related to them on a personal level, how whatever he did with them, their case or their matter, their simple documents, he made them feel that they were the most important thing that he was handling at that time. And those same people always commented about his disability, what an inspiration he was to so many people because he was able to overcome his, and that they would look at themselves and say, I've got nothing to complain about considering what he has. Just over the last year, I've lost my mother, Joe, and then most recently my father. the three most influential people in my life. Almost single-handedly, Joe has formed me into the attorney that I am today. And he's provided for my family over all these years, for which I'm eternally grateful. Many years ago, Patty Bowman, a member of our bar, said to me, "You know, Paul, you're the luckiest attorney in Lycoming County. You get to practice in real estate and estate administration, things that you really enjoyed doing, and you don't have to worry about the rest of the stuff, and you get to practice with Joe Ryder." Over the years, I've thought many times about what Patty said, but she was wrong. I wasn't just the luckiest attorney in Lycoming County. In my opinion, I'm the luckiest attorney in the world to have ever been to be able to practice with Joe Ryder. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. West. Thank you all to the members of the committee. The court approves the report and resolution of the committee and enters the following order. And now this April 19th, 2021, in consideration of the resolutions presented by the committee appointed to draft resolutions in the death of Joseph L. Ryder, the said resolutions are adopted, and it is ordered and directed that the resolutions herewith submitted and attached to this order be adopted as an official expression of the Lycoming County Law Association and this court, and that the same be spread upon the records of the court, and copies of this resolution be delivered to the family of Joseph L. Ryder. And it's further ordered and directed that said resolution be entered at large upon the record of the court, and that it be printed in the Lycoming Reporter. I'd now like to ask my colleagues to say a few words about Joe Ryder. Judge Tira. I think he was here.
Judge Butts, Judge Tira had to leave. He sends his apologies.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll seniority to Judge Linhart. Thank you, Judge McCoy.
Thank you, Judge Butts. I never had the opportunity to get to know Mr. Ryder on either a personal or professional basis, but I certainly knew of Mr. Ryder, and I knew of his reputation as an exceptional attorney. And I always enjoy these memorial services because it gives me and others who are participating an opportunity to learn so much about members of our bar that we may not have known before. And what is clear from what everybody has said today is not only was Mr. Ryder an exceptional and respected attorney, but to hear those describe how he treated others, how he carried himself personally and professionally, how he cared about his community and his clients. What a special way to have lived his life, and what a special way to be remembered. My condolences and sympathy to his family.
Thank you, Judge Linhart. Judge McCoy?
Paul, Cliff, Fred, Ed, and Tom, I have to say that the resolution that you prepared for today was probably one of the best that I have sat and been a part of. I also, your comments were so heartfelt and detailed. I just congratulate you on doing such an incredible job honoring and memorializing Joe Ryder. I, like Judge Linhart, did not really know him on a professional or personal level. I too knew of him, and I clearly feel a little cheated that I didn't get to know him based on what everyone had to say today. I also pass on my condolences to the family, as well as to you, Paul. Obviously, it's a huge loss for you as well in your day-to-day life.
Thank you. Judge LeVecchio?
Thank you. I'm sorry for coming in late, although I have to admit that when I tuned in or got on, however you say it, Ed was finishing his remarks and I was just stunned at just how accurate and eloquent and wonderful he said it. And then I was equally impressed, I think, as Judge McCoy said, with Mr. Burkholder and Mr. Roman. Paul, I'm so sorry for your losses with your parents. That's devastating. And Joe, I know it's very, very difficult. And I'll keep this real simple. Years ago, I was arguing before, and I knew Joe very well, of course, because he helped me whenever I needed it, as he helped everybody else. And if I needed to know an estate and trust question, a tax question, a real estate question, he answered it and probably spent 15 minutes when he could have spent 2 minutes with me. But I remember arguing before the Supreme Court decades ago and telling Judge Nix, Chief Justice Nix at the time, that something was the quintessential tool of tyranny. And he said, let's not get out of control, counsel. But Joe was, it's not a hyperbole to say he was the quintessential attorney and the quintessential person. And I thank everybody for such a eloquent and articulate way in which you described it.
Thank you, Judge Lavecchio. I think one of the things that I've discovered as the person who prepares all the orders for these memorial services is what a significant impact that many people, many of the longstanding members of the Law Association have had that influence in our everyday life. And just being a part of the memorial service, you learn so much about the history of the Law Association and its membership. And when Cliff Reeder spoke, it reminded me of the big round table at the back of the Ross Club, because maybe people don't remember that I was Judge Smith's law clerk for 2 years. So it was through that association that I got to meet all of the senior members of the Law Association, because they were sitting in the back round table. And I remember when Mr. Ryder would come in, he was the kindest man. And Judge Smith would say, now, you know, because he was the orphans court judge, if you have any questions, you need to call Joe. And I would be so intimidated to call him, because I would think, oh, this is something I should know. I mean, I've been through all these hearings with Judge Smith, but he never, ever said a negative word. He was just, now what is, you know, just explain to me what your problem is. And he would walk me through it. And he would help me come to the understanding of what was happening. So it wasn't as though he said, now this is what you need to do. He was just very kind. And I can't imagine what it would have been like to have worked with him, as Paul did, for so many years, to be able to learn at the right hand of Mr. Ryder, because he was just such a kind person. And then when you're sitting at the round table, as I did once, because, you know, women weren't supposed to be at that round table, the day Judge Smith brought me there to celebrate the end of my clerkship, Mr. Ryder, where everybody would harass me and pick on me and Judge Smith would be laughing, Mr. Ryder would just say something that would kind of calm everybody down, and let's be respectful, you know, and let's be, don't be dismissive, because, you know, she is an attorney. She's more than just a woman. So it was just kind of classic times that at this occasion remind me of what a privilege and an honor it has been to work with him and to work with so many people who devoted their life to the practice of law. And it wasn't just about working in the office. It was not just thinking about who I am in my office, but who I am as a lawyer in the community, and the reputation, the concern about how people perceive us as lawyers. That was something that he lived. And I just think that it's just been an honor to be associated with him. And I can't imagine the loss that, Paul, you have shared and that his family is enduring at this time, because it's a hole. It's a hole that we will never be able to fill. And I appreciate the members of the committee also for your for your stories and your words of kindness about Joe. So I'd now be happy to hear any comments that any members of the bar would like to make about Mr. Ryder. I'd ask you to just unmute yourself if you'd like to add anything here today.
Your Honor, this is Bill Carlucci. If I may speak briefly, please. May it please the court, I'll direct my remarks to the Ryder family. Fred Howland was absolutely right. The word that comes to mind is gentleman. And Mr. Roman was absolutely right. A phrase that comes to mind is throwback. Some members of the bar have heard me say before, about 20 years ago, the dean of the Yale Law School wrote a book called The Lost Lawyer. And the gravamen of the book is this, that for about 100 years in our culture, lawyers were people who helped their clients find their way. More recently, lawyers have become people who help their clients get their way. And the theory of the book is that lawyers have lost their status in the community because they stopped being the kind of people you look to find your way. And that's exactly what Joe was. That was somebody you looked to find your way. I had the great honor to be invited to be a member of the nominating committee, which Joe chaired, the Lycoming Law Association nominating committee, which, as far as I could tell in those days, was Bill Askey, Joe Ryder, and me. And Joe called me once a year and told me the day he was buying me lunch at the Ross Club, and please be on time, which meant be early because you don't want to walk in after Joe's already in his seat. So at 5 minutes of 12, I found my way in, and as soon as I walked in, someone would tell me which table was reserved for Mr. Ryder. And I would sit down, he would come in, sit down, Bill would sit down. There would be pleasant hello for a minute or two, and then Joe would open up the manila folder he was carrying that had every conceivable note about every member of the Lycoming Law Association when they came in and everything he had learned about them. He even prepared for this meeting and had an exhaustive knowledge of the members of the association. He would ask me about what I knew about members, about their practice, if I believed they'd be willing to serve. And what was, apart from his preparation, what was most remarkable is Joe was always pushing for diversity. That is, he wanted women, he wanted young people, he wanted different voices. He didn't want the Lycoming Law Association board to be a bunch of middle-aged white guys who all saw the world the same way. He wanted a diverse board, and he was pushing for that. I will mention quickly that in addition to knowing him as an attorney, I know him because Paul and I are members of the congregation at the Church of St. Anne. I have, as Paul has, occasionally been invited to serve on committees at the Church of St. Anne. You know when the church has a problem because you get a phone call from the rectory asking you to attend a committee meeting. A phone call from the rectory always means there's a problem at the church. And so you show up at the appointed time. Joe was always on the committee. There was always lighthearted talk for about 5 or 10 minutes. And then the pastor, and we've had a number of them, of course, the pastor would explain, we have a little problem, ladies and gentlemen, and the pastor would explain the problem. And then there'd be jawboning. There'd be different people offering their point of view, and everybody would listen politely. And then sooner or later, Joe would ask to speak. And then, of course, he'd be recognized, and he would tell us what we were going to do. And we would all nod, and that became the plan. Over and over and over. You would jawbone, and then Joe would tell us what we were going to do to solve the problem. And I am sure he'll be missed by his family. He will certainly be missed by the court. He will certainly be missed by the Bar Association. But I can guarantee you he will be deeply missed by the congregation of the Church of St. Anne.
Thank you, Mr. Carlucci. Anyone else?
Judge, I have remarks that our federal magistrate judge, Skip Arbuckle, has sent.
Oh, he must have had to go.
He was here and he gives his regrets. He actually composed these short remarks last week, but he was really eager to attend the service himself. And I got an excited message from him this morning that he moved his 4 o'clock hearing to 5 o'clock so that he could attend. But we've gone too long and he didn't want to keep his 5 o'clock appointment waiting. So he's asked me to read this for him. To the court, members of the bar, and the family of Joseph L. Ryder. In the likely event that court duties prevent me from being able to attend this memorial service, I have asked our Law Association Executive Director to share these brief thoughts about the passing of Joe Ryder. I only knew Joe as the president of the Lycoming Law Association Foundation. Moving here late in my career, I never had a case with him, but I did have the privilege of attending LLA Foundation meetings where he presided. He was always the picture of modesty and decorum. He did not serve for the publicity or for the chance to be in charge. It was obvious to me, and I suspect to the rest of the board, that he genuinely believed in the goodness of lawyers and the obligation that we all share to help the less fortunate. When he did speak about himself or his clients, it was always with the sense of wanting to help, simply for the sake of being a helper. Joe Ryder was a good man who helped others, and he is missed. Thank you, Joe, for your service to the bar, and thank you to the court for allowing me this opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to share? Hearing none. Ladies and gentlemen, this now would conclude the memorial service for Joseph L. Ryder. I'd like to again thank the family, members of the Law Association, and friends for attending today's service. This special session of court is hereby adjourned.